It only took a pandemic, but it seems like schools are finding some footing this year curbing violence inflicted in the education system. Unfortunately, violence, murder, and bullying have become commonplace in American schools, almost to a point of contention amongst those living in other countries. One thing is certain, mental health and schooling have been in a similar picture for many years in the US, up until this point, of course. Hopefully we'll see more of a change to help students dealing with traumas at home and from bullies. This video is not going to be a fun one, so we'll be talking about one of the original school tragedies. One that's somehow infamous but strangely untalked about. An event so catastrophic, it's considered the deadliest school massacre in the history of the United States. In the early 1920s, the township of Bath, located 10 miles northeast of Lansing, Michigan, was mostly just farmland. A small little town with about 300 residents voted on a consolidated school district plan in 1922. This plan would see a first-grade student body come in and attend until the 12th grade. Like with most major decisions in small towns, a tax hike for properties was put into place to fund the project. It's estimated that the project was worth about $43,000 in today's money. One of the biggest voices against this project was Andrew Philip Kehoe, a man described as frugal and notoriously impatient. He was a farmer on land only a few miles from where the school would be located. A little background on Kehoe is needed from here. Firstly, he suffered a major head injury during his job as an electrician in his young adulthood. Not only that, but rumors spread after his stepmother died from a grease fire in their home that he was a murderer. The truth is that he had tried to help her, but by throwing water onto her, he actually sealed her fate. As he grew older, he began building a reputation as a penny pincher and someone easily provocable, but also a kind and respectable man. Despite this, he had reportedly shot a neighbor's dog after the barking had annoyed him so badly, and even beat a horse to death after it hadn't performed up to expectation, although it should be stated that I cannot seem to find any evidence to back these claims. Due to his money-saving ways, he was elected as a school board trustee and treasurer for a combined total of 4 years. He was cited as often arguing against the board members, preferring to save money, even when it came to the most necessary school equipment. Kehoe always argued about how much he paid in taxes. By 1926, his $12.26, about $185 today, tax was increased to a whopping $19.80, which is about $289 today. He constantly tried to reevaluate his farm for lower taxes, but that all changed when he was served a foreclosure notice by the local sheriff. It was reported by a family member that he had stated, "If I can't live in that house, no one else will." After a brief stint as a town clerk, he lost his April 1926 election, which drove him into a rage. He was rejected by the public and he resented the community for it. Many speculate this was what sent his diabolical plans actually into motion. He began to tear apart his farm, destroying the land and the tools that he used. He also began to stop making payments to the bank, perhaps due to his chronically ill wife Nellie Kehoe and her medical bills. It was during this time period that Kehoe began to give in to his dark ambitions. Between late 1926 and early 1927, Kehoe had been suspected of stealing and purchasing dynamite, as well as pyritol. This was an incendiary explosive that farmers used for controlled burns and excavations. He also purchased a .30 caliber Winchester bolt-action rifle and began loading his Ford truck with metal debris. On May 16th, his wife Nellie was discharged from a hospital, and it was believed between this day and May 18th that Andrew had actually murdered her. She was placed in a wheelbarrow until that fateful day. 8:45 a.m., Wednesday, May 18th. Neighbors in the area heard an explosion and saw a roaring fire coming from the Kehoe farm. The house and farm buildings were all set ablaze, and authorities were teaming with volunteers to put out the fire. Unfortunately, it was to no avail. Not only did the house collapse, but the charred body of Nellie Kehoe was found in the wheelbarrow, surrounded by valuables. As Andrew Kehoe left, he stopped to tell his neighbors, "You should get to the school." As authorities drove to get to the Kehoe farmhouse, a thunderous explosion rocked the small community of Bath. Through a combination of dynamite and pyritol, the entire front corner of the school had been decimated. The building had resembled something out of coverage for a First World War magazine. Children and parents were rushing away from the school, but not all of them made it out alive. Eyewitness Robert Gates was quoted as saying, "Mother after mother came running into the schoolyard and demanded information about their child, and on seeing the lifeless form laying on the lawn, sobbed and swooned. In no time, more than 100 men were at work tearing away the debris of the school, and nearly as many women were frantically pawing over the timber and broken bricks for traces of their children. I saw more than one woman lift clusters of bricks held together by mortar heavier than the average man could have handled without a crowbar." The initial explosion massacred 38 people. Most of them were children. But the most chilling account of the events came from the author of a book about the incident, Monty J. Ellsworth, who recalled seeing a pile of children about 5 or 6 under the roof, which had now collapsed. After returning to his farm to retrieve a rope for retrieving the children, Ellsworth had found his eyes locked onto Andrew Kehoe, who was heading towards the school. He grinned and waved his hand. And when he grinned, I could see both rows of his teeth. Unfortunately, this wasn't the end of Kehoe's plan. About a half hour after the initial attack, Kehoe had driven up to the scene in his truck. He called over the superintendent of the school before they both wrestled for Kehoe's long rifle. As they fought, Kehoe detonated his truck, killing not only himself, 3 others, including an 8-year-old boy who had survived the initial blast. His victims ranged from 7 to 74 years in age, and in total, Kehoe was responsible for the deaths of 45 people and the injuries of 58. All but a handful of Kehoe's victims were no older than 14 years old. The aftermath of a disaster such as this was a minefield. Police had come across the southern wing of the school, which had an estimated 700 pounds of explosives rigged to blow. But on the plus side, investigators believe that the initial explosion had actually caused it to short circuit. Had that not been the case, Kehoe's plan was inferred to be destroying the school in its entirety. They recovered the explosives after disarming them and headed to the Kehoe farm. There they found the remains of Nellie Kehoe after looking for her in multiple hospitals, as well as combing the areas for extra dynamite. With the farm burned to the ground, nothing but ash and soot, there only stood 2 things that remained: a fireplace and a sign. The sign was left by Kehoe, and his last message read, "Criminals are made, not born." In wake of the attack, authorities came to the conclusion that Andrew Kehoe had acted alone and without aid. 3 months after the incident, the final tally on the kill count was added. 10-year-old Beatrice P. Gibbs passed away following a hip surgery needed to recover from her injuries. The remains of the Kehoe farm were removed, and then the land was actually sold to auction. Now a park sits where the old school used to be. James Cousin's Memorial Park contains a plaque in honor of the victims of this terrible tragedy, along with a Michigan State historical marker discussing the disaster. In later years, the disaster seems to be faintly talked about, not so much as a forgotten memory, but a scabbing of an old damaged heart that needs healing. Today, the township stands strong with around 12,000 citizens, and life continues to move on from the horrors that one man thrust upon the town of Bath. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, a comment, or even subscribe to be notified of the next upload. Remember that you're loved, and I look forward to broadcasting to your screens yet again next time. Sleep tight.